This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Sharif Abdul Quddus. When the American Bankers Association scheduled their annual meeting in Chicago for this week, they probably weren't expecting the reception they've received. Instead of a quiet convention in a downtown hotel, the ABA has been greeted by a parallel gathering of thousands of people in what organizers call the Showdown in Chicago. Spearheaded by the group National People's Action, organizers have tried to bring together a cross-section of Americans affected by the financial meltdown, including homeowners, renters, farmers, workers, and retirees. The showdown kicked off Sunday when protesters entered the lobby of the hotel where the ABA delegates are gathering.
We are not here to cause trouble. We are here because we are in trouble.
That's right! Bust up big banks! 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 Bust up big banks!
The American Bankers Association has helped loosen the rules that protect us, allowing the unfettered greed that has brought us to the brink of a recession.
That's right.
And for those bankers who are members and support the ABA's war against the working and middle class, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Another 5 minutes.
What do we need to stop doing?
For more on the showdown in Chicago, we're joined by George Gale. He's Executive Director of National People's Action, the lead organizer of the showdown in Chicago. George Gale, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you first explain why the protests and why the ABA in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, this is an incredible situation. I mean, who would have figured that the same banks that created the foreclosure crisis, sent the economy into a tailspin, needed billions in bailout dollars, would then lead the charge to kill any real financial reform that would protect consumers and make sure something like this didn't happen again. So the ABA is the top lobby for the banks, and they decided to have their convention in Chicago, and we felt we had to be there to greet them.
And what are some of the main things that you're calling for?
Well, one, we think their ideas have failed. Their focus on deregulation paved the road that we walk today. So it's time that they stop spending tens of millions of dollars up on Capitol Hill each month trying to defeat financial reform and sit on the sidelines, particularly around consumer protection, around policies around too big to fail, and around community reinvestment. And there's a consumer protection agency that's been proposed by President Obama that would actually protect people from predatory consumer products, but the bankers are trying to kill that program.
And what exactly are some of the policies and regulations that the lobbying groups are fighting against? We've seen the Consumer Protection Agency that the Obama administration is trying to put forward, as well as regulation of over-the-counter credit derivatives. Talk about some of the specific legislation that the lobbying groups are fighting.
Well, on the CFPA, the Consumer Protection Agency, which really would be like an FDA for consumer products. So we're able to regulate and ensure that we have safe milk and safe toys for kids, but currently we aren't able to make sure we have safe financial products for everyday people. And as we've seen over the last year, bad financial products don't only hurt individuals, but they have the potential to hurt entire communities and the entire economy. So this is a really common sense, long overdue idea that the bankers are trying to kill. The bill got out of the House Financial Services Committee, but it was bruised and battered by the time it got out, and the ABA and their cronies are leading the charge against it. The ABA is really spearheaded by some of the biggest banks in the country, and they're up on the Hill with their 45 lobbyists, the American Bankers Association, and this is one of their #1 targets.
And what are some of the events that the Showdown in Chicago is holding? You have a march planned, and there was also testimony heard from various people. Can you describe what you're doing in Chicago right now?
Yeah, yesterday folks from 20 states came into Chicago, around 1,000 people, and had a People's Commission where the commission was made up of everyday Americans who formed a jury and then heard testimony from their peers. So they heard from family farmers, from retirees, from students, from people who'd gotten predatory loans or got caught up in a payday lending cycle, and they heard their testimony, and then they also heard accounts of how the banks, the Wells Fargos, the Bank of Americans, and the JP Morgan Chases have actually benefited through this crisis. And then they indicted the banks and then decided it was time to head over to the bankers' convention. So our hotel is here at the Hyatt, right across the river from the Sheraton, where the bankers are having their convention. And they thought it was appropriate to have a 20 swing band kick off their convention as if it was the Roaring Twenties for the bankers while the rest of the country's suffering. And so over 1,000 people marched over to the bankers' convention. Around 100 folks got into the convention and sent a clear message. It's your ideas have failed. It's time for a new set of ideas, and sit out on the sidelines in terms of financial reform over the next 6 months.
And the Showdown in Chicago also held a People's Commission Sunday, gathering testimony from those affected by the financial meltdown, as you just described. Larry Ginter of the group Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement addressed the crowd. This is a clip.
I've got some questions I want to ask you. And I'd like to see you stand up when I ask these questions. If you have seen your pensions or retirement take a hit, stand up. If you are tired of sky-high credit card rates, stand up. If you are tired of outrageous overdraft fees, stand up. If you're tired of more people being forced out of work, stand up. If you're tired of people losing their homes, stand up. If you're tired of payday lenders exploiting people in tough situations, stand up. If you are from rural America and you're tired of bank greed, stand up. If you're from urban America and you're tired of bank greed, stand up. If you think it's time to put people first and hold banks accountable, stand up.
That was Larry Ginter speaking in Chicago on Sunday. George Gale, you're the Executive Director of National People's Action. What is your background in organizing and dealing with financial institutions?
Sure, I've been organizing for over 15 years, and most of that time has been spent around banking policy. So our organization was founded by a woman named Gail Sincata, who was a mother of 6 from the west side of Chicago, who saw banks redlining her neighborhood, and she led a charge here in Chicago to take on the banks, and actually then spearheaded a movement that led to passage of the Community Reinvestment Act in 1977. So for over 37 years, our organization has been one of the leaders on the fight on the ground in everyday communities to make sure banks are held accountable.
And finally, George Gale, the issue of compensation. We saw President Obama come down on Friday talking about curbing executive compensation this year. We see that Goldman Sachs, the lead financial institution, is on track for each of its employees to make something like $700,000 in compensation this year. Your thoughts on that issue?
Isn't that incredible? I mean, we bailed Goldman Sachs out. I mean, just in TARP money alone, they got $10 billion from the American taxpayers, and now they're ready to hand out $23 billion in bonuses in 2009. If you took $1 billion of those bonuses, you could prevent 200,000 foreclosures and lift 100,000 families out of poverty. Goldman had a key role in creating this crisis, and now they have a chance that they don't have to be the GOAT the rest of their life. They could actually step up. Lloyd Blankfein could be a hero and actually donate Goldman bonuses to help everyday Americans. We're going to take well over 1,000 people to his office here in Chicago at 10:30 a.m. this morning. And then from there at 12 noon, a bigger crowd will gather at the American Bankers Association to really address the too big to fail issue. Our folks feel the only thing that's too big to fail is the American people, and it's time to bust up the big banks.
George Gale is Executive Director of National People's Action, the lead organizer of Showdown in Chicago. We will link to their website at democracynow.org. I want to thank you very much for being with us. As we turn now to Honduras, where the conflict between the coup regime and supporters of the ousted President Manuel Zelaya